Hello and welcome back to another episode of DWeb Decoded. I'm here as the founding officer of the Filecoin Foundation with Paul Brody from Ernst Young. Paul and I have seen each other in similar spaces through enterprise circles in blockchain, and I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
Thanks for having me. I'm a huge Filecoin fan. I really want to see a world of not just like crypto and digital assets, but distributed computing and information services take shape.
Amazing. So Paul, you obviously have been in the blockchain space for quite some time. In fact, one of the earliest champions to really push blockchain and enterprise, even when traditional enterprise have always been a little skeptical on what crypto is doing. I'm so curious about how you've seen the landscape change over the years. What is the landscape like today when you're talking with traditional enterprises about blockchain? And what is it like a decade ago?
So, a decade ago, you started the conversation by talking about blockchain. And you talked about at least I would talk about sort of what a technological revolution it is, and also what a huge opportunity is to kind of transform the economics of the Internet of Things. That's actually how I got into blockchain, is really working on the Internet of Things and this understanding. It's like the t-shirt says, the cloud is just somebody else's computer. That's what IoT is. And if you think about it, having a mechanism for bringing online all of these assets which exist at the edge of the network, it's hugely important. So a decade ago, we started this conversation with what is this technology and what its potential is. 6, 7, 8 years ago, we are starting to have this very financial services focused conversation, which has been a roller coaster, like Bitcoin, Ethereum, scam, fraud, and now we're past, I think, almost all of that. People recognize still plenty of scam, plenty of fraud, but I can use these technologies in useful ways, but we're still focused on the financial conversation. And I personally still want us to get us eventually past the financial conversation into distributed computing and information systems, because the value, a huge portion of the value that can be created will be created in that space.
No, that's wonderful. And I'm so curious what it's like to do this in a company like Ernst Young. Obviously, most people know Ernst Young for traditional consulting, auditing, so many different kinds of services. I'm curious about how the company overall is viewing crypto. Have you been able to shift the needle externally, internally? Has the demand been outside in, inside out?
It's been a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
I think EY we're a private global partnership, and in many ways, our partners reflect the full spectrum of viewpoints. So we got some very conservative accounting partners. I sat down at a dinner very early on in my time at EY, where a group of very conservative accounting partners said to me, Paul, when are you going to stop wasting our money on this blockchain thing? And that was one part of it. Then there was another, I remember a session early on. I got in trouble because I called my education session how to launder money using blockchain. And I got in a little trouble for that. But one of the partners got me and said, Paul, is this going to eliminate fraud? And I promise you, fraud is I think it's wired into human nature that you don't have anything to worry about. And then we have others who are just full-on enthusiasts, right, all the way up. And really the reason why we have survived, I've been in this role for a decade now, which is a terrifying thought. I spent 10 years as a leader of EY Blockchain, and that's because 3 consecutive chairmen, 2 chairmen and 1 chairwoman of EY have supported our venture into this space. They have seen the value proposition, and in spite of some worries, we have built a very substantial business, not just in consulting and auditing and tax advisory, but we are unique among the big consulting firms in also investing heavily in the core technology and building privacy technology for business users.
Amazing. So I'm curious to hear, how are we doing in the enterprise report card for blockchain? I remember back in 2015, everyone was saying, blockchain for this, blockchain for that. You saw the appetite of Microsoft really open up to Ethereum. And then you kind of hear it go quiet for a little bit. Was it behind the scenes that magic was happening? Was it because people are using blockchain services where they're no longer even seeing the crypto component? Or have we gone back in time when you see a lot of headline news with FTX and the scandal? So I'm curious about the enterprise crypto report card.
The enterprise crypto report card right now, I would say I'm giving it a B-. So all companies are very similar in respect that there's people on one side who are pushing forward, and there's others who are sort of pulling back, and the power and the influence kind of waxes and wanes with public scandals and things like that. We've had a lot of distractions. It's not just FTX and some of the scandals that were distraction. I think the biggest distraction in the last 10 years has been this ridiculous pursuit of private permission blockchains. They are pointless. They have an almost 100% failure rate. They simply are unnecessary complications, and they cause all kinds of confusion. One of the strangest things is a lot of people think private blockchain means I have privacy. It doesn't. Inside the walls of a private blockchain, there's still no privacy, right? One of my friends said it's a private nude beach, right? But it's still a nude beach, and you don't want to share with your competition what you're buying, where it's going, what kind of operational stuff you're doing. I feel like the regulatory lack of clarity is disappearing. The distraction of private blockchains is disappearing. The comfort level with there may be bad actors. It's like the internet, there may be bad actors, but we don't have to be one of them, and we can use this legitimately. All of those things are coming together, and what is especially valuable is all of a sudden we have what I think for the enterprise, not for consumers who've already moved past this, but for the enterprise, we finally have our first real killer application, which is stablecoin payments. And to give you a sense, like inside of EY, we estimate that if we could switch our traditional banking payments to stablecoin rails, we could save $100 million a year on bank fees.
Wow. That's huge.
That's killer application money. That's ROI money. That's something that CFOs understand. And it's something, it's not about crypto. It's not about some like exotic magic internet money asset. It's not about having a strategic Bitcoin reserve or an Ethereum reserve. It's about just doing something we do today, but cheaper. And that is something they just intuitively grasp.
No, that's amazing. So I'm curious to go back to what you just said about private versus public blockchains, right? And Ethereum obviously is a great example of that. How do you actually vet what is a legit blockchain that is private or public? And how do you really think about bringing that into EY?
So honestly, we really don't. So my day job is, and this is very similar to a question we used to get all the time, another one of my favorites that I think has no purpose, which is, what's your cross-chain interoperability strategy? Yep. I don't have one. We are an Ethereum shop, and I believe that the world of blockchain is going to end up very similar. It's a technology platform. What we know from technology platforms is that the world likes a standard. We don't have, it's very funny actually, so TCP/IP, or the internet, IP is the internet protocol. And once upon a time, when I was young, we had many different network types. When I first joined IBM, which is a terrifying, it's like 25 years ago, I was issued this like dongle. It's the size of like one of those British electric plugs. And I was like, what is this thing? And they're like, that's your token ring adapter. I'm like, a what? Right? And I had just come from university with Ethernet, right? We were, and they're like, yeah, token ring. Like that's how we do things here. And we used to have lots of different networking protocols. You know, now we just have IP. I think that's the future of blockchain. That's why we're really focused on Ethereum. There are now over 130 Ethereum L2s and Validiums. So my personal opinion is, we don't really vet other chains. We build on Ethereum. It's the largest network, and my expectation is that it's likely to continue to be that way.
No, amazing. So I'm curious about Ethereum and enterprise. Who is leaning in the earliest? Who are the earliest adopters? Because obviously enterprise is a large sector. You started off with stablecoins and a lot of the financial payment side. Curious about where the state of smart contracts is today. Would love your thoughts on who are the earliest adopters. Are they more experimental ready companies out there? Are they coming from a particular part of the world? Are they a particular set of the financial sector?
So we've had waves of adoption. So lots of companies, you know, we have like 50 or 60, I think, clients that are using public Ethereum for product provenance. Like, is this product organic? You know, where did it come from? That kind of thing. I think we're tracking something like 40 million bottles of wine on the Polygon proof of stake network. Every bottle of Peroni beer in Italy has a QR code on it that will take you to an EY blockchain site that will show you the organic origin of the grain in that bottle of beer. So we had a wave of sort of product traceability. We got a wire service that's doing about 1 million articles a year. They are time stamping and notarizing those articles to prevent tamper-proof, to enable tamper-proofing. So that was a wave. We had some very good pilots in private environments. So EY built the Microsoft Xbox video game system. It's on a private version of Ethereum because we could not build the privacy to deploy it on public. But we have a great case example. We cut cycle time for invoice calculation in the Xbox network by 99% and cost by 50%. But we couldn't deploy it on the public network because we didn't have privacy tools. Now, we are in what I think of as the third wave of deployment, which is companies doing production industrial applications on public networks, mainly Ethereum, and that's stablecoin payments. We've got a few smaller things. We have our first fully privacy-enabled smart contract running on Ethereum that does renewable energy procurement, like complex business logic on-chain with privacy. So we're just dipping our toes. There's stablecoins, which are going to be huge and quick, and then we're dipping our toes into privacy-enabled smart contracts and supply chain traceability. That's going to be a bit slower because privacy tools are not as mature as we would like, even though we're really getting there.
No, that's great. And I wanted to also talk about a buzzword of the last few years, which is AI. We actually just had an AI agents night last night here in this space. But what are you guys thinking about in terms of your existing work in adoption of AI? Is it already baked into the product? What can we do more in the blockchain space to embrace it more? How do we prevent big tech from closing off tons of public data into another business model of what we see has failed in Web 2?
So one of the things so I feel like there's two answers. So first of all, on this, creating and keeping an open environment, I'm a big fan of efforts to create decentralized application models, decentralized infrastructure and deployment models. One of the things I think that you hear a lot of people, I'll call them consumer ETH maxis. What they talk about is something important to me, which is censorship resistance. I feel like a lot of business users don't spend enough time thinking about what does monopoly resistance look like? How do I make sure, my joke is how do you make sure that one day you don't wake up and discover that you're a taxi company in a ride-sharing world, right? And so public decentralized networks are foundational to having open access infrastructure and monopoly resistance. And I think that's undervalued by business users. Now, when it comes to AI, we're in the early stages, right? The way I sort of very broadly think about it, AI is going to be everywhere and it's going to do all kinds of things. But very broadly, the way I sort of think about AI and blockchain together is analytics, insight, recommendations running on top of execution. Blockchain is a deterministic, reliable, tamper-proof execution environment. And AI is the greatest automation tool in history for figuring out what should I do or what does the data mean. Now, we are using AI, obviously, in application development. We're using it in analytics. We've got a number of patents, and we're getting ready to launch our first, basically consumer-accessible smart contract testing system using AI and our smart contract testing infrastructure. And we can do some really cool things where you can map multi-contract ecosystems, you can decompose the key functions, and then you can create your own test cases, but you can also have the AI create test cases for you. Our goal, and I think we're closing in on this, is we want you to be able to do 80% of what a typical vendor says is a smart contract audit. We want you to be able to do 80% of that with the AI tool almost instantaneously before you click on buy or execute or sign a transaction. Our goal is to put smart contract testing in the hands of everybody in plain English with sophisticated tooling, and I think we are just a few months away from hitting that milestone.
No, that's incredible. So that leads me to my next question is, what does success look like for you in the next year, in the next 5 years? I know there's two different time horizons to that, but curious about what that means for your area of work in the enterprise space.
Success for me in the next year looks like this. I want our privacy network, Nightfall, deployed as an L2 and an L3, and I want people using it. That's my number one success criteria, and I want people using applications under privacy. 5 years from now, I want us to be on a growth ramp where we've identified a number of killer applications that are privacy-centric and are running at scale, and that includes our kind of smart contracts. My long-term goal, my great personal goal is I really fundamentally believe all B2B contracts belong on public blockchains. They belong on Ethereum. They will do some really transformational things with it. They will make commerce cheaper. They will make commerce faster. They will make commerce more efficient, substantially more efficient. I think about, again, this Microsoft experience, 99% reduction in cycle time, 50% reduction in cost. I also want to see a world where commerce is fairer, where we have fewer digital monopolies, and the infrastructure that we build is much more monopoly resistant. And so small to medium-sized businesses will have a easier time competing in this digital ecosystem that we live in.
No, amazing. And my last question to you is, how did you decide to become a cult leader when you grew up? Tell me about your personal journey into this space. You obviously got inspired into the blockchain space from the IoT wave and obviously the benefits of the DNA rails of crypto, but wanted to hear from you because you're obviously so passionate about what you do. What creates that drive? What led you to do the work that you do today?
So I probably have always been a bit of a type A kind of hyperactive guy. My mother complains that I quote, I never slept, which is, she's like, you're always just absorbing things. And I think for me, so I went through my career, I found a lot of things that were interesting and I liked absorbing them. But about 13 years ago when I first got a taste of blockchain, and then 12 years ago when I met Vitalik and I kind of started to really understand what Ethereum could do, I was like, this is it. This is it. And I remember this very important moment for me. I was a vice president at IBM. I had $1 billion P&L, 5,000 people, and IBM, and we did IBM's first blockchain. We showed it. I have this wonderful picture I keep of me and Vitalik and a bunch of IBM and Samsung executives showing off IBM's prototype at the Consumer Electronics Show in January of 2015. Wow. And after that show, IBM was like, awesome prototype, great work, wrap it up. And I'm like, what? They're like, yeah, we're done with this blockchain and crypto thing. It was interesting, but that's not a priority for us. And I was like, but it's a priority for me now. And I got to go do this. And so at that point, I had to leave and go somewhere that was going to let me build in this space. So somehow I ended up on this road. And then I wrote that book, Ethereum for Business. And I somehow along the way became a bit of an ETH maxi and very passionate about kind of the whole space. And so now, I wear the sweatshirt that says cult leader, and some of my colleagues are like, Paul, that's a little on the nose. I want to just go on the record officially and say, this is not a custom thing. I did not have this made for me. I found it online. I'm like, that's hilarious. I want it. So.
No, that's amazing. Well, thank you for coming on the show today. We obviously care so much about enterprise adoption, being in the decentralized storage space where so much of storage today belongs to an enterprise, and really figuring out the roadmap to get there. So we so appreciate you coming on and also sharing your insights. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, and also just thank you for the work that you guys are doing. I want decentralized infrastructure to be the fourth big wave of blockchain and crypto.
Absolutely. It's all tied together.
You
cannot have one without the other. Otherwise, it's just a layer on top. So infrastructure is everything, in our opinion. Thank you.